What's up, everybody? This is Hall of Fame wide receiver Terrell Owens here, a.k.a. T.O. Get your popcorn ready. Do a favor. Leave my guy Conor a 5-star rating after the show. Listen to it. Give him some feedback. And also, if you want to listen to my podcast as well, check it out. Subscribe, share. You don't need to leave a 5-star rating. We're 5-star. I'm 5-star all the time. My podcast is called Get Your Popcorn Ready with T.O. and Hatch. Again, check out both of those podcasts. And hey, check it out, listen, and subscribe.
All right, thanks for tuning in to Eagles Brawl of the Brawl Network. However you're listening, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. Your co-host, Conor Myles, here. I have a very, very, very special guest joining me right now to talk Eagles. It's actually former Eagles linebacker Marc Lillibridge, a.k.a. Bridge. He has Bridge Brawl on the Brawl Network, too. Bridge, thanks for hopping on the show, man. I've been dying to talk to you about football.
Well, man, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited, too. Philly fans are the craziest fans in all of football. I think that's pretty much world renowned. And a quick story, I love my time in Philly. It wasn't long enough, and we'll get into that. But when I was scouting for Green Bay and I was a scout for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I would have to go into Philadelphia to scout, like for preseason games. We're looking at, you're trying to find players, and Philly was always one of my teams that I scouted because I knew the front office well. Scott Cohen was a really good friend of mine who was in the front office for a long time, and so we would exchange information. He would be like, "Hey, this is a guy that probably won't make our 53-man roster and probably not a practice squad guy, but he might be at a position you're looking for." So I was in Philly all the time. I would never wear my other opposing gear. Like I would never wear Packers gear in there. I would never wear anything else, not walking through the parking lot, nothing. I would just keep my head down. I wouldn't even take, normally I would have like a briefcase. I wouldn't even take that because I didn't want anybody to think I was anybody different than just some random dude walking through the crowd. Man, those Philly fans, you guys are nuts, man.
Wise man, because we even beat up one of our own in Mike Scott. Mike Scott wore a Redskins jersey to an Eagles game and got his. He ended up beating everybody up, but he got jumped for it. We are crazy.
You booed Snowman. You booed Santa Claus, and you cheered when Michael Irvin was partly paralyzed. So yeah. Eagle fans are brutal. It's all right, man. Passion. I'm not mad about it. I'm not
very different breed when it comes to the passion. But
yes, it is.
Speaking of your Eagles tenure, let's get some insight on that, man. I want to hear about some players you grew up with here.
Conor, if you haven't done it yet, I highly recommend. I think it's on my Facebook. It might be on my old Twitter. It's Twitter still. So Bridges Football. I had a diary. I took a diary when I was, or let's put it that's totally sound like my teenage daughter right there. I had a journal. Okay, when I was my time in Philadelphia, just because I always dreamed of playing in the NFL. Right when I was 5, that's the only thing I wanted to do. I set my life course to play in the NFL. Every decision I made up to that point was to try to play in the NFL. Every Halloween, I went as a football player. It was just kind of, it coursed in my veins. I read every book I could. I still have a ton of memorabilia from being a kid. And so I always thought, this might make a good book someday, or this might make a good, just something I want to relive. And I'm an English major, so I like to journal and write anyways. And so I was digging through some boxes last year, and I found the journal. I'd kind of forgotten I did it. And so I literally had every day, and I put it every day that coincided last year with training camp. I put up my thoughts of the day of what I went through, in my tenure in Philadelphia. And so it was pretty amazing. It was really cool to be able to look back and relive some of those thoughts and those memories and how I felt. And there was times where, brutally honest, training camp sucks. And, it's maybe not as hard nowadays as it was back in 1995. But it was just, it was a tough time. But I was fortunate in a manner and in a way I wasn't, because I was there for Ray Rhodes' first year. And I was an undrafted free agent. Now, a guy named Dan Shonka, who was a longtime scout, actually now runs ourlads.com. So if you need depth charts for any team, go to ourlads. Yeah, go to that's Dan Shonka. So, and he's from my hometown. in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And so so Dan, when I was at Iowa State, we sucked. And I played out of position. I was playing defensive end when I was really supposed to be a linebacker, but we just didn't have enough bodies my senior year. So they moved me to defensive end, and I still had a really productive year. Still was, honorable mention All Big 8, and really played well against Nebraska. Nebraska had the Outland Trophy winner that year. And so Dan always kind of said, hey, man, this kid can play. We just got to get him in the right position. But he's probably a practice squad type player. But I tested well. I ran, if I ran in the 4.5s, in my 40 at 240 pounds. And, my vertical was 39 and my bench press was, I think I did 225, 34, 35 times. So, I mean, I was always a good athlete. And then, and I understood the game. I just needed reps at linebacker. And so when I got to Philly, when I ended up signing with Philly, Dan really pushed hard to get me to the Eagles. And so when I went there, they had a pretty good group of guys, and they had just had Bill Romanowski, Kurt Govea was there. Willie T is maybe one of the most underappreciated linebackers in all of NFL history. Such a freaky athlete. I mean, still to this day, I've been around a lot of really good athletes. William Thomas and Mark Fields are two of the best linebackers I've ever seen that people really don't talk about, but athletically, God just gave them different skills than the rest of us. And I remember actually at one point I was in camp and I'm standing next to Romanowski and Govea. And Romo had that reputation at this point already of being the prick he is. But I was like, I don't care. Like he made it in the league. He's got rings. I'm going to follow this guy. But he stood there. We're in the camp, and all of a sudden he looks at me and he goes, Don't do anything that he does. Don't pay attention to what he does at all. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, he's so much of a better athlete than you are. You got no chance of ever doing anything William Thomas does. He goes, none of us do. And so he goes, so you just stick to what you know and follow what we do, more or less. Follow what the white guys do. You got a shot here. Just smash some faces and hit people as hard as you can, and take it from there. And so it was. I had a great time. I could literally relive almost every day of that camp, not only from my journals, but just after then going through it, just even stuff I left out of the journals. It was a great time, but it was hard for me because Ray really wanted veteran guys. And Coach Rhodes just really wasn't a chance for us young guys. Now, Mamula was there. We were the draft choice of Mike, and he was kind of in because of how he tested at the combine. And, it was funny because all my numbers were actually better than what Mike's were. And Mike, I think he had such a target on his back, and it was so hard for him to kind of fit in because he was cool. Like we hung out, but he wasn't one of the guys, you know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't, and not that I was only there for training camp, right? I mean, I made it through the third preseason game, but it was one of those situations where it was, we were so veteran heavy, and you have now talk about a staff, right? Like when I look back on this staff, I'm like, holy Lord Almighty God! But it served me well later on in my career because I can use this as a reference point to go back and talk to these guys and say, hey man, you remember me from there? And most of them didn't, but I mean, we had Gruden was on our staff. I mean, Gruden's was offensive coordinator. Juan Castillo was the assistant offensive line coach. We had Emmett Thomas was our defensive coordinator. Who's a Hall of Famer, right? Mike Turkovic's our D-line coach. Joe Vitt is the wet rat is my linebacker coach. I mean, we were just loaded with coaches and guys on that staff that went on. Callahan was our offensive line coach. I mean, we were just guys that went on to have huge successes in the NFL and the coaching ranks, and they were on our team. But I'm sitting there with Randall Cunningham and Rodney Peete at quarterback, right? Guys that, you're watching these players. Romo's a guy that I looked up to, and William Fuller. And I mean, there's just such studs. Ricky Waters, right, man? I got a great Ricky Waters story, but it's, Charlie Garner. I mean, there was just guys it was so cool. Fred Barnett to be around those guys and to talk to those guys and pick their brains. I was really fortunate. I had a great time. I knew I wasn't probably going to, you think you're going to make it, right? Every day you think you're making it. And I made a lot of plays. I did a great job in camp. But I don't know if I ever really got the fair shake I thought I deserved. And I say that as someone that's now been in personnel and someone that knows I wasn't ready. Like I wasn't I look back at it now, wasn't good enough to like play on the 53 man, but I know I could have been on the practice squad. And I proved that. I mean, I ended up, making it other places, but it was kind of, the cards were kind of held against me a little bit just because he really wanted veteran guys. And we they had one. Sylvester Wright made it. And Sylvester Wright was getting cut. They told him actually that you're getting cut, bring your playbook. And we had one more practice. And at the practice, he went and asked coach if he could rush like rush from defensive end position, and they let him rush, and he was going against, I don't know, somebody, it wasn't a top end guy, but he ended up getting like 2 sacks against this dude, and they're like, whoa, okay, you can add this versatility. I'm like, well, I can do that. I mean, I can rush a passer. Never got the opportunity, and then Sylvester made the team, and I'm out the door. So, but good for Sylvester.
Well, that was a part of Ray Rhodes' tenure that people killed him about in Philadelphia. Was the he favored veterans over the youth, and then kind of that's really how his tenure ended. I mean, basically. But I want to hear that Ricky Waters story. Philadelphia loves their boy Ricky Waters. I want to hear this story.
I love Ricky Waters. Okay, Ricky, I told him this story at the Super Bowl 3 years ago, and he laughed his butt off. He didn't remember it, of course, because he's got multiple stories like this. And we were sitting there we're in Jackson, Mississippi, and we are playing our first preseason game versus the Jets. Okay, and this was a bumble of a trip, anyways, and it was just, it was cool. And part of the things I'll remember about it was that they actually they did sing the national anthem before the game. They actually had a prayer said before the game, which I'd never heard before. And I was standing next to Randall Cunningham at the game, and he was like, "Man, I've never seen this before." And someone who's, I'm a hardcore Christian guy, so it was pretty cool for me to have them say that, say a prayer. But it was also in that game hot, man. It was humid. I mean, people know if you're from Mississippi, there's just a different heat in August down there. But so we get done. We're after the game. And I played a little bit. I didn't play much, but I played a little bit. But we're getting ready to get on the bus to head back to the airport. And we're standing there, and you got fans down there, whatever else. There's just people lined up. And there's some bunch of dudes that are trying to get the attention of all the coaches. Hey, give me a workout, give me a workout. And then there's just, some beautiful women that are hanging out. There's little kids. And I mean, it's a crowd that hangs out after games, right? But Jackson, Mississippi doesn't get NFL games. So they're hanging out by the bus. And I'm sitting on the bus, and Ricky's in there with Charlie Garner, and there's just knockout. There's just a knockout girl that's on the bus, and or outside, and she's standing there with a guy, and this guy is, dude, he's got to be 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", huge, probably three bills. Okay, right. I thought he was a player. I actually thought he was like a player, maybe for the Jets, and then that was his girlfriend. And so we're sitting there, and Ricky's like, he goes, "Man, that girl's beautiful." And I'm like, "Yeah," and Charlie's like, "Yeah," and Charlie's like, "Bet you can't get her number." And Ricky's like, "Come on, man, you know who you talk to, right?" I mean, now if you know how Ricky talks, it's different. And he's like, "Man, I don't need her number." He goes, "But I'll just do it just because I want to prove to you I can do it." He goes, "I don't want it, I don't need it, but I can do it." And so Charlie's like, "No, you can't." And so whatever, they made some bet. I'm not sure what the bet was. Maybe it might have been $1,000. I don't know. And all of a sudden, Ricky taps on the glass. Okay, and the lights are on inside the bus, so it's because the windows are kind of are beveled and tinted, but with the lights inside, you can still see out. So he taps on the glass, and the girl looks up. Their whole group looks up, taps on the glass, and he points, right. And so she looks up at her man, looks at the bus, looks up at her man, and then he goes, and then Ricky holds up a can. Okay, he's got like a Pepsi can or Coke can, whatever, and walks over. And she comes to the front of the bus, and he meets her at the front of the bus. And he yells out to the guy, "Hey, I'm just giving her autograph. She just looks like she wanted, I saw her earlier. I was just giving her my autograph." And I'm big. Literally signs his autograph, and at the same point hands her her number at the same time. So she then as they're talking, she ends up signing another. Ricky had some piece of paper or something like that. Ends up signing her number to Ricky. He gets on the bus, looks at Charlie Garner, and says, "Told you." And I'm just like, God dang, dude, this is just a different level, man. NFL is just a different level. And it was just, and I don't know if Ricky ever did anything with it. He didn't need to. He probably threw it away. And he didn't remember it when I told him the story. But it's just, I remember thinking to myself, I mean, there's just different breeds, man. And Ricky had it like that, though. I mean, Ricky was so smooth. He was just such I'm not saying the smooth with the ladies. I don't know that. Maybe he is. But he was just such a smooth dude. He was so easy to like. And he was but he was just such a good dude. And he was such a good player. Like, for me, he didn't need to talk to me. I was some scrub, free agent. And he was always so nice to me. And that's one thing I will remember about that team. Like Rodney Pete. I went over to Rodney Pete's house with Holly Robinson, Pete, right here. I'm just hanging with Mr. Cooper. I'm freaking out. And, we're watching with Jay Fiedler and Antone Davis. We're watching the Tyson fight. And I'm like, those were some cool memories and cool experiences. And I think that's one of the things I always appreciate about my time in Philly is the guys on that team went out of their way for a young buck like me to make me feel like I actually belong there. And it was pretty cool.
It's nice to hear. That sounds like a Philadelphia culture thing because that you hear like stories like this now with the current teams today. So it sounds like it's always been this type of way with the culture there. But William Thomas, we can never forget him. Obviously, he was a superstar, but he also always comes back and speaks to kids. I'm not sure if you're familiar. They have like an Eagles youth camp
Yep.
that they did virtually this year, and he met with Giovanni, who we're about to start having on our show soon. And Giovanni's like 12 years old, doesn't obviously know who William Thomas is or anything like that. And he's sitting there learning from William Thomas about the game. And then this 12-year-old kid talks to me on because we're talking about what he's going to do for the podcast. And he's like, I need to start talking about Randall Cunningham because William Thomas taught me a lot about Randall Cunningham. And I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
It's so like to talk to you too, because this is like again before my football era, to get like an understanding of like, well, this is what we used to do. Like this is how this team used to be. This is how laid back guys used to be. It's great learning this stuff. I love learning about the history of the team.
Well,
Your insight's great.
I think that team had a lot of characters, right? I mean, you had Barry Wilburn, who had been busted for cocaine in Washington, who led the NFL as a rookie, I think, in interceptions. And then, Ray brought him over, had him in Washington, and then brought him back over. And so we had David Fillmore. I mean, we had guys that were part of, a big time history of what the NFL is. Fred McCreary, who goes on to be one of the best fullbacks in the NFL, was a rookie that year with me. There was just a lot of really good, good coaches. Danny Smith is our special teams coach. It was fun for me because it was, Randall was always kind of the lead guy, but Rodney Peete was such a smooth dude that he kind of had the pulse of all the guys. And so where Randall was kind of bigger than life in a way, Rodney kind of was the everyman, and the guys just appreciated him from his time at USC, and they knew his history, and they knew how he's just a good looking guy. And it was a fun group of guys because it was so eclectic, and there were so many different characters. I mean, we're sitting there. I mean, this is one of the things I talk about in my journal is I'd never seen it before. And it was, multiple things I'd never seen before. I come from a big 8 background. We played studs, right? I mean, I played against some of the best players in the country. Rashawn Salam won a Heisman, and Tommy Frazier, and we played against Wisconsin when they won the Rose Bowl. Powerful Iowa teams. We're in the locker room before my first preseason game, or second preseason game. I take that back, the one in Philadelphia. And Ray Rhodes, our head coach, is always chewing on a ginseng stick, right? That was his kind of his calling card. He comes over before the game, and these guys are doing shots of Everclear, like to get hyped up for the game. And he takes a pull off the Everclear and goes, "Let's go!" Like he starts screaming, and I'm just like, I looked at Willie T. His locker was next to mine. I go, I don't know if I'm ready for the NFL. Like I don't know if I need this. I mean, Romanowski used to pull out he had this whole huge. I mean, it's historically everybody knows this, and whatever, if some of it was illegal or some of it wasn't. He literally had a tackle box full of uppers, downers, painkillers, whatever you needed. And he pulled this box out, and he looks at me like before a preseason game, and he goes, hey, Rook, you need something? I'm like, no, dude. I'm like jacked up like this. Like I'm adrenaline high. This is like a lifelong dream for me. My adrenaline's flowing 500 times. And he looks at me. He's like, oh, he's like in his 5th year, right? 4th or 5th year in the NFL. Oh, when you play as long as I do, you're gonna need this stuff. I'm like, what? You're like, dude, you're in like 5 years. I mean, you're not like you're like a 12-year veteran. Now, granted, he went on to have whatever he did, 16, 17-year career. But I'm like, it's just different breed, different cats. And I met Barry Bonds when we were there. We hang out with all the Philly guys. We shared a locker room with the Phillies. So I mean, it was just a cool, neat experience. From a kid growing up in Iowa, it was completely different than what I expected it to be. But at the same point, man, I loved every minute of it until the day I got cut. But it was a cool deal. And again, I still have friends. I mean, from Fiedler and I got to be really close at that time, and then we actually played together in NFL Europe. So Jay and I are still close. But there was just guys on that team. Willie T, when he was scouting for the after he retired, he scouted for the Raiders for a long time. And so William T and I would see each other scouting in combines and whatever else and catch up. And so it was always it's just really cool. You got those memories. Govea, I still talk to Kurt. It was just a really cool experience, and I'm glad I was able to do it.
I'm not gonna lie. I think you have the best welcome to the NFL story I've heard. Like literally, that nothing beats that.
Well, I'm going to rephrase. I'm going to go back a second then. Okay, so we're up in Lehigh, and we went up to play doing this little scrimmage at Lehigh. And this is the point before we practiced in Westchester. So our practices we were in Westchester, and there was a really cool bar called the Rat Trap that was awesome, by the way. So if you're old school '90s and you remember the Rat Trap,
Westchester University.
Yes, there was a bar called the Rat Trap that was awesome on the corner, and we used to hang out there all the time. But anyways, we're up in Lehigh to do this little scrimmage, fanfare, whatever it was, fan fest, and all these guys, so a lot of these guys had played for the Redskins, and then Ray was there, of course, as a D coordinator, and then that's where he became the head coach for Philly. So we're sitting in the locker room, and these it's just a college locker room, right? So you got the little metal lockers, and it's just there's not much to it. All of a sudden, Doug Williams walks in, right? And Doug Williams, if you don't know Doug Williams, who, of course, the Super Bowl winning quarterback, Doug Williams is gigantic. Okay, I mean, he is just a huge dude. I'm 6', maybe 6'2", just shy of 6'2", 240, pretty big dude. I was pretty ripped up. This cat walks in the door, and he's wearing just dress clothes because he was not playing or was out of football at the time, and he's coming in to say hello to like Raleigh McKenzie and Govea and some of Wilbur and some of the guys he had played with the Redskins. And he's in the locker room, and I look at Kurt, and I go, God, I know that face. Man, I know that. I saw you talking to him. Who is that? He goes, it's Doug Williams, man. I mean, that guy's like, one of the Super Bowl MVPs, like one of the best of all time. I go, that's Doug Williams. Holy cow, it is Doug Williams. Like, I'm freaking out, right? As a football fanatic and a football fan, I'm like, holy. And then I look at him again, and I size him up, and I'm like, I don't think I'm good enough to play in the NFL. That guy's huge. I can't sack him. There's no way I can get that guy down. Quarterbacks are that. Like, I'm looking at Randall Cunningham, and I'm having a tough time with Randall Cunningham. I look at Rodney Peete, and I'm like, okay, I can get Rodney Peete now. And I can get maybe Fiedler's a big dude too. But I'm like, that's a quarterback? That's how they make quarterbacks in the NFL? I go, I don't know. I don't know if this is actually – maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, because he was just enormous. And still to this day, I mean, that's why he's one of – he didn't never be a Hall of Famer because he never had that career in Tampa. But he was, he's a stud, and he's an icon, and he changed the way that quarterbacks were thought of in the NFL. But he was just a massive man.
Unfortunately, my parents grew up in Virginia and were diehard Redskins fans. So I have Doug Williams, John Riggins, that whole entire offensive line rush grand burnt into my memory as a child growing up. But Doug Williams is huge for people that don't know. I really, if you're listening to this episode, please Google him. He's like 6'6". Freaking huge. That guy's a monster. I mean, I've seen him around too, because he still works for the Redskins right now, currently. What a guy, though. He is a class act.
Yep.
Actually, now I know this has nothing to do with podcasts or story time, but my parents had their wedding rehearsal at that Redskins restaurant they do over there, and Doug Williams actually went over to them during their rehearsal, and he goes, "Anybody Redskins fan here?" And my dad's like, "Oh yeah," like starstruck, like yeah, I love him. He grabs a football and he signs it for him and he gives it to him. I still have it in my house to this day. I know he's a Redskins guy, but I love my Doug Williams. First black quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, man. We gotta always respect the guy.
Yeah, you do. Yes, you do. And he's just, but he was a massive man, and it may question my manhood and if I was ready to step up and play in the NFL. So it was,
man,
yeah, good times, man. I enjoyed my time in Philly. Had a great time out there. We would, I didn't get to spend enough time like out hanging out in Philly. I did later on in my life, but it was, I've always enjoyed Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia, the fans are fanatical, but they are passionate, and that's what you want. I mean, that's when it's all said and done, that's what I think it's, why it's one of the most iconic franchises, and it always will be, is because they just have, it means something. This isn't just like, it's a culture, and it's, hey man, this is what we're doing. We're going to bust our ass for 5 days a week. And then so we can go and spend our money on Sundays watching our Eagles. And it's, I think that's as a football fan, and it's just as someone who loves the game. That's why I love my time in Philly. It was a great experience for me, and I wish it could have been longer. But at the same point, it was just to have a taste of it while I was there was really cool.
That's awesome, man. So let's get into your scouting background, because now I want to get into like the football side of it, what the Eagles are looking like now. Being a former linebacker yourself, the Eagles completely it goes way beyond Jim Schwartz, because this is back like after Trotter left the team. The Eagles have really devalued the linebacker position over the years. What is your take on that? Like, do you think that's the right route to go with how the NFL is going nowadays, though? But because to me, I still think you need at least that one good linebacker, and the Eagles don't have that.
Yeah, it's interesting because Schwartz is a linebacker himself, right? And so, or former linebacker himself. So you would think that you would value a linebacker. I think that we're in a different era of we're never going to have the Buckus, the Nitschke, the Singletary, the Ray. Ray was a little different, Lewis, but you're never going to have that just smash mouth, fill the gaps, fill the ISOs linebacker anymore. You're just not. You have to be able to flow and be able to play to the outside, to the numbers, to the sidelines, and be able to play in coverage if you want to play. I mean, that's where like a Luke Kuechly, was so good, and where you have a guy like Levante David is underrated. Bobby Wagner can play that way. Some of the better guys that are still doing it, or you're a 3-4 guy and you rush the passer. And so if you're in the interior, the game has kind of changed, and it started a couple of years ago when Mark Barron, was in Tampa, and the Rams brought him up and kind of made him a hybrid linebacker, and they did that with Dante Buchanan in Arizona. And you kind of see that now, right? I mean, you're seeing that with these new hybrid linebackers coming in from the colleges, the Devin Whites of the world. These guys are 6 foot, and they're 215, 220 pounds, and they can fly. And they're not afraid to hit people, but they're really adept in coverage. And I think if you have one of those guys, I think you're okay. If Schwartz feels like he's can play that with a bigger safety, and he was able to get away with it for a lot of years because of Malcolm Jenkins could kind of fill that role for a long time. I don't know if they got that. I mean, Rodney's McLeod fits it to a little bit, but they don't have that one just stud linebacker guy that can kind of fill that. I mean, you're going into the season with Nathan Gary, T.J. Edwards, and Duke Riley as your starting linebackers. That's a tough. You got to hope that maybe the rookie Taylor can kind of step up. But if you plan on playing a lot of nickel and you plan on playing a lot of dime majority of the time, then maybe you're okay with it. It's not how I would run my team and not how I run my defense. But it's worked. You know what? But it's worked for Philly, and they have rings to prove it. And Schwartz has proven that he's a capable and smart defensive coordinator. But in that manner, you got to be able to get to the quarterback, and they've been fortunate with that.
To the point though, they did have Malcolm Jenkins, so he really was like their lead linebacker. So now they don't, and they're hoping Will Parks and Jalen Mills for that role. And
sure,
I mean, to be determined.
Yeah, and again, the one thing here's the one thing that the Eagles have where I think it's going to be, you got Slay, of course. I think Darius is just is so underappreciated in so many different avenues. But the guy who I think is your stud corner, and I think is going to become the alpha dog, and I've said it all the time, is I think Avonte Maddox is just a special player. And I really think that before it's all said and done, before the season's over, he'll be getting the Pro Bowl conversation. I think Slay's always going to get it because he comes in with that reputation. But football guys that know and pay attention, Avonte Maddox is the next guy. And it will not be surprised if Schwartz uses him in different situations this year to highlight his skill set because he's a talented player.
I mean, he's going to be the outside corner opposite of Slay. Yep. So these are big words to hear from you because nobody thinks this about him. There was times where you saw in his rookie season where they threw him on the outside finally, where they finally just had too many injuries. They had to put him on the outside corner, and he held his own versus DeAndre Hopkins and guys like that. And then I think personally, I don't know if you agree with this, the sophomore slump for corners is real. Like it's definitely real. And he had that because the Eagles were like, well, we're going to put you at nickel. Now we're going to put you outside. Now we don't really know. We're just going to rotate with all these injuries. Like, that's not good for a young player. So I think the situation was rough. But now that you add Nicole Robin-Coleman and you add Darius Slay, I mean, he's going to be facing the lesser wide receivers, I would imagine still. I mean, I'm high on him too, so I'm glad to hear you say this because you hear all of these beat writers for the Eagles during training camp so far just highlight how he gets destroyed by bigger wide receivers. They're always like, yeah, if he was a little bit taller, he would have made this play. But I'm thinking it's practice.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of practice effort and game effort is completely different. I don't think that we're.
And you hate to say that. I mean, that's the truth. But you hate to say that. You want guys to practice like they play. But I think also the other part for Maddox is going to be is that the familiarity now with this defense. He's into year 3, and you're right. I mean, no matter what it is, the NFL's hard. People think it's just we're going to go and just line up, but that's what he needs to do. Sometimes you just got to be able to have a player. That's what Pat Peterson, where he was so fortunate early in his career, was when they took him. And again, I'm not comparing Avonte Maddox to Pat Peterson. I'm just using this as an example. There's some guys that I'm not going to say they don't learn well or whatever else. Some guys you just don't mess with. You almost don't coach them. Just go out there and lock down this guy. Here's what you got. You got him man to man, or you got him and you're in cover 2 or cover 3. Play it and go. And if you move them around a lot, then they start thinking. And it's hard, especially for young players. If you're thinking too much and because then you're trying to be perfect. Instead of just playing and letting your natural ability take over, you're trying to think too much. And you're trying to be perfect in every play you make. And so for guys like that, when they did that with Pat Peterson, when he came up with the Arizona Cardinals, they just said, listen, you got this side of the field, just take it, handle it. You got those guys, let's go. Or you're going to run with this player and you have him all day long. Guys can do that, and that's a challenge. And then that's you're questioning their manhood a little bit and saying, hey, this is a one-on-one battle. You got to win this. And so I think that's what they need to do with Maddox a little bit is just don't let him think so much and just let him, his natural talent, his natural ability is there. Just let him go play. And so I think I hope that they do that the right way. And I know you have to be a thinking man to play in Schwartz's defense. He expects that because he comes from that Belichick tree. But I'm not saying he doesn't have to think on his feet. But at the same point, you don't keep it simple, stupid is the KISS principle. And I think sometimes we forget that some of these young guys need that.
The Eagles forget that period. Forget that period. They struggle. I was going to say after you finish, that's the number one thing that the Eagles struggle with. They overload their young players, and then you have the Nelson Aguilars that happen. You have it's rough because J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I'm not sure if you were a fan of his at Stanford, but they asked him to come in after like middle of his rookie season and say, hey, you got to play the X, you got to play the Z, you got to play the Y, and complete overload. He admitted it too. I mean, at Stanford, he was just a jump ball guy, and that's it. That's all he has to do in a run-first offense. He comes to Philadelphia, and they're just telling him, hey, we got so many wide receiver injuries, you got to be forming every spot of the wide receiver spot, and it doesn't happen. So sure. I think that's an Eagles problem more so than a huge problem because, like I just said with the Maddox, I thought he looked great his rookie year, but he played free safety because McLeod went down. Then he played outside corner because they had injuries there. Mills went down. He did a lot his rookie season. And then the next year, again, like we just said, they played him all over. So I think it's like more of an Eagles issue because they do it with all their guys, all their young guys. Because even Andre Dillard last year, they were like, you could play right tackle. And that it's not that easy.
Yeah. Well, I think and that's part of it is that you're a pro, right? So you should be able to do more than one thing. I mean, that's just you're getting paid. So let's go. You got to be able to do more than one thing. But at the same point, you also then have to know your limitations to some of this stuff, right? When you take a guy from Stanford, you think, okay, he's smart and he should be able to do multiple things. But it's also for rookies, and this is the one thing I tell guys, like when you're trying to make it as a rookie free agent or you're trying to do, just make it. You're just trying to figure out where the freaking locker room is, man. You're just trying to figure out where to eat and how to get your sleep and how to keep your body right against guys that have been doing it for a while. These are pros. So you're already overloaded. And then on top of that, you got to learn 3 different positions, or you got to learn, I did as a rookie when I was in Philly, they wanted me to know all 3 linebacker positions. And, I was fortunate that I could do it, but I can't sit and tell you I was comfortable. I wouldn't have been as comfortable as if you just said, okay, hey, you're just the middle linebacker. Just know this part. You just need to know these checks when this happens. Okay. It's difficult, but again, if you want to make it and you want to play, you have to be able to move and understand stuff. So I'm not giving Maddox a pass, but I also think coaches tend to over pressurize some of these players. And I think it's going to be different this year because we didn't have offseason, because there's no mini camps, there's no OTAs. I think these guys are going to be the veterans are going to need to step up, and you're going to need them more than ever. And so I think I think the coaches need to, at least the first couple of weeks, I think they need to simplify it and just let players play. And I think you'll see the cream rise to the top, and those are the teams that are going to end up being successful, 4-0, 3-1 coming out of the gate because they weren't trying to do too much. They weren't trying to. They weren't trying to win every snap. They were just going out there to look at the big picture and say, okay, how can we put our players in the best situation to win?
All right. So speaking from a veteran standpoint, so you played in the league, you scout the league, you were an agent in the league. This is the perspective I'm going to need for you on this one. Jason Peters there's a report out right now that if they want to move him from right guard because Andre Dillard's out for the season, they want to move him to left tackle. They need to pay him more, is what the report is. It hasn't been proven yet that it's just a rumor, but that's what it looks like right now. The Eagles are continuing to roll with him at right guard. They're putting Matt Pryor, they're putting Jordan Mailata, Jack Driscoll as options at left tackle. I don't know if they're trying to sweat him out. I don't know what the situation is going to be, but me personally as a fan, I'm not comfortable with putting Jason Peters at a new position and a new left tackle at a whole new position 2 weeks before the season starts. Are you thinking like maybe this is a way the Eagles are sweating around his demands, or like this is? I mean, what would you do if you're Jason Peters in this situation? Do you think he has a right?
Oh, it's great. That's it. I mean, this is a fun situation, actually. I mean, Howie Roseman will figure it out. He always does. I think that if you're the Peters camp, right, you are happy to just get a job, and you are happy to be back, and you're happy to be, all right, hey, I'm cool with it. I know they moved on. This is the future. You got Lane on one side. You're going to go Dillard on the other. And I'll come in. These are my boys. I'll come play, I'll play guard with you. I'm in year 15 or 14, whatever it is. And I'll take this, $2 million or $3 million. Because it's not, that position is not the same. It's just not. It's not the same demand on your body. It's not the same, to what he needs to do. Left tackle is different, man. It's a breed. I mean, it goes from, the difference is, except unless you play the Rams, everybody else is the best players on the outside, right? I mean, you're going to be blocking from he's got to block. He goes from blocking DeAndre Poe in Dallas Cowboys to now, blocking Marcus Lawrence. There's a difference, man. I mean, that's just a different breed. And it's there's some guys that you're now blocking Chase Young. You're now blocking the Ryan Kerrigans. It's just a different set of and you're not getting help every time. Most of the time when you're a guard, you can get double teams at the center. I think if I'm Peters camp, I think it's a no-brainer. I think that I don't know if he needs to get the top $12 million money, but I think there should be some incentivized that in there that the Eagles should come back and say to him, hey, if you every game here's a $500,000 bonus, or every whatever that number comes to. I mean, I think there is some leeway, and I think that the Eagles have done that historically. Now, granted, you could always sit and say, hey, we're going to, you have to honor your contract and this is where it is. But you know what? When they brought him in, they didn't bring him in and tell him, hey, there's a possibility you're going to be our left tackle. They brought him in saying you're going to be our starting right guard. And so I think that Doug Peterson is a veteran coach when it comes to understanding the players and their thoughts and the rumblings in the locker room and how to keep guys happy. Because if you do right by Jason Peters, that's going to make Kelsey happy. That's going to make Lane Johnson happy. That's going to make Carson Wentz happy. That's going to make Deuce Staley happy, the coach. I mean, they're going to see guys that will say, okay, man, we take care of our own. He's been a big part of this historically. If we're asking him to do more, we should pay him more. And that's just fair. And that's the way the world works. And so I would guess something will get done. And even if the rumblings are there, it wouldn't surprise me if they jump the gun and Jeffrey Lurie comes and says, hey, what do we need to do to make this right by him? Right. I mean, if you were a player, if you were Jason Peters before you kind of complained, or before you had your agent make a demand, wouldn't it be really cool if the team came to you and said, hey, we'll take care of you. What do we're going to give you, we'll pay you $6 million this year. Is that cool? We'll give you these incentives or do whatever else. I think that'd go a long way toward, not only in the locker room, but I think that would go a long way toward making Jason Peters happy. And I think that would be it'd be a big deal for the locker room.
I agree with you. I mean, we ask all these guys to be loyal to the team, and then when it comes time for the team to be loyal to them, we're like, nope, don't do that. Because You're right. He got brought in on the pretense of him playing right guard. Now, you're asking him, okay, sorry, Jason, we told you 2 years in a row that we're trying to replace you at left tackle, but we're screwed again. We need you to play left tackle. Then pay up. Yep. Pay up. Put them fans in it.
The hard part is you lost Brooks, and who was a stud. I mean, he's probably one of my favorite guards in the NFL. And so this line is already decimated. And you know that Peters, the one thing that has been pretty good for him consistently, and is that, in his career, he's battled and he's been there. And so, and the guys know him and the guys appreciate him. And I think it's, you're not going to find a guy as good as him right now on the street. Okay. You're just not, unless you trade, but you're going to have to give up something for it, which then has a price tag to it too. is that price tag that you would give up, is that worth the same as what you would pay a guy you already have in-house? Those are the things that the front office has to figure out. And unfortunately, they didn't want to have to do this. I'm sure Howie Roseman wasn't sitting there thinking, I'm going to lose my starting, tackle before the games even start. But that's the cost of doing business in the NFL. And if they want to have some success, I think you got to pay them, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I bet they do. I would bet that they do.
I mean, he signed a contract last year for 5.5 guaranteed, and then he signed one this year for 3. Like, I mean, I'm sure the 2.5 can be made up in incentives somewhere or another.
Sure. Yep.
But another thing is, from an agent standpoint, what the hell is his agent thinking? Why? Like, this should have been a pretense in the contract already. If you're going to move me to left tackle, there's going to be incentives inserted, because it wasn't like Andre Dillard was a lock.
Right. Yeah, and I think, what, maybe there is, and maybe we don't know that. Maybe there already is. Sure. Maybe there's, before the conversations already got started, maybe there's a gentleman's agreement, or maybe there's something that's in there that says, hey, if he starts X amount of games or incentive-wise. I haven't seen his contract, so I don't know what the actual verbiage is. But,
so none of us do.
But if it's in the contract, I mean, I doubt it would be in the contract, but maybe there's a an off the books deal where you say that, where the agent says to Howie, hey, if this guy ends up playing left tackle again, you're going to have to redo something. And most guys honor that. So that I could see that have happened as well.
I believe so too. So a couple more things. You posted something about Boston Scott that I absolutely love, because I'm a huge Boston Scott supporter. Everybody's all upset because the Eagles didn't sign a veteran running back this offseason. I'm not one of those people. I think their running back group is fine as is, and if somebody goes down, they could fill that void during the season if they needed. Boston Scott, I think you got to increase his usage this year. For every 7 snaps he was on the field, he had a first down last year. So, I mean, I'm all on the Boston Scott train.
You know what I mean? Because here's the thing: everybody's always like, well, Corey Clement brings this, a different element to it, and Miles Sanders is going to be your bell cow. You want him to be, but he's not a true bell cow, and that's what the difference is. Where I think Boston Scott, not that Boston Scott is either, he's kind of an undersized guy, but his skill set, he's such a powerful, compact little runner that he is just he churns his legs on contact. He continually fights for first downs. He always falls forward for extra yardage. It means something to him, right? I mean, he was phenomenal in the preseason with the Saints a couple of years ago, and so the fact that he was so successful last year, whenever he had the ball in his hands, everything he did, was positive in that offense, and so I think he's a compliment to Sanders, because Sanders can kind of do more of the things to the outside and to the edges, where I think Boston's not afraid to get dirty. I mean, he's getting those gritty yards inside, and he's productive with it. He's a great one-cut guy, hits the hole with the explosion. I don't think you need to. I mean, because I think you can. I always say go with fresh legs at that position, because you can. I mean, let's be real. You could go pick up a Carlos Hyde somewhere else. Not that Carlos is old, but I mean, in running back, years he is. You can find a guy like that, right? I mean, you can go get LaShawn McCoy back, or you can go get, a veteran guy that you think you need. You can find a serviceable back. I mean, we see it in fantasy all the time, right? When you're fighting for your championships, week 13, 14, you got some guy in there that wasn't even on most rosters, week 2 and 3. So I think Boston Scott adds value to this team, and I think he's better than people give him credit for. And it won't surprise me, actually, if he takes actual vital snaps away from Miles as the year goes along. One, to save Sanders, save his legs for the stretch run. But 2, I just think he adds his skill set's different than what Sanders is, and that's okay. I mean, you don't have to be the starter to be the starter, right? I mean, we saw that years ago, or 2 years ago, in with the Rams, right? I mean, Todd Gurley was okay. Well, we're going to do it. And then all of a sudden, what's it? Not Malcolm Brown, the other
C.J. Anderson.
Yeah, C.J. Anderson comes in and becomes kind of became the bell cow from Gurley, who had just gotten paid. So I think I think you're okay having at that position having 3 or 4 backs. I'm not saying by committee, because I don't know if the Eagles have. I'm not high on a lot of the guys they have behind those 2, but those 2 are a very good complement for what Carson Wentz does in that offense and for what Doug Peterson does with that offense. I'm okay with where they're at right now.
I agree with you completely, because I think Boston Scott's the next Darren Sproles. I think the huge thing you hit on is the short yardage. He's really good at short yardage. Perfect guy for the short yardage back. I'm all in on Boston Scott too. Is there any other Eagles players you have your eye on in 2020?
You know what? I talked about Maddox, and I know I'm probably higher on him than a lot of other guys. I think that it's always been, and again, I'm sure I'm singing to the Eagles fans. Your receivers are not good, and it just seems like every year you're waiting for the next guy, right? Okay, is it going to be Alshon? Is it going to be is it going to be who's my guy that you guys cut? Right, the guy
Aguilar.
that Aguilar, yeah, is it going to be Nelson? Who's the next guy going to be? Is this year, is it John Hightower? But Jalen Reagor is a stud. I mean, I would get him the ball as much as possible on jet sweeps, on bubble screens.
Man, as we're recording this, I promise you, as we're recording this, he got hurt at camp.
Did he really?
He tried to tackle somebody on an interception and hurt his wrist, and they took him back to the locker room. So
okay, well, let's hope to God he's not. But
I'm praying too, because I was. Never mind the Eagles stuff. I promise you, this is not just all my life. I love football. I live or breathe football. Huge draft guy. He was my wide receiver 4 in this class. I simply believe he is that good. I think he's the next Odell Beckham. I simply believe he's that good because of the inaccurate quarterback play at TCU really, really, really hindered his whole entire box score. If you go in and watch that film, completely different player than what his box score suggests.
No, I agree. And I mean, he's just a tough – and he's for a littler guy, he was tough. And he was very not only explosive, but he was one of those guys. I mean, that's where he's getting hurt. If you're talking about getting hurt, he's getting hurt chasing somebody down, right? Because he's that competitive, and he wants to win every snap. And so I think that he is a guy that I expect big things. And it would not surprise me if that offense is kind of run through him and then through Zach Ertz. That's kind of how I envisioned it by the midseason. Again, he's going to be delayed no matter what now if he's injured. But even going into it, he's delayed because he missed the offseason. Because there wasn't the OTAs in the preseason games like we've talked about. So he probably was going to take till week 6, week 7 to kind of really get going. But I kind of really thought that he would be a guy that you could build a team around or an offense. And I'm not going to say around, but where you could make him a focal point of, get him the ball 15, 20. He's not Tavon Austin, right? I mean, he's not that guy. He's bigger, physical, tougher. Just there's more things to his game than he had. And I think you could make a whole different group of packages for him, and then that would accentuate the backs out of the backfield. That would accentuate the run game. That would accentuate Ertz in the middle. I said this. I think I wrote about this at one point. I would have no problem if you put Ertz at tight end on the one side, on the right side, and put Jalen Reagor on the left side, and literally just have them run mirror routes every time, right? So if Ertz is running a freaking crossing route, then Reagor's running a crossing route, and they're crossing each other. If Ertz is running an out route to the right, Reagor's running an out route to the left, and literally just run the same and have Wentz 1 or 2. I mean, that's just his option is 1 or 2 right there. And then if it's not, it's a check down to Sanders, and you're good. I don't know what you're going to get out of Deshaun. I don't know what you're going to get out of Alshon. I mean, those are kind of your third complementary players, but you could have those 3 players, Sanders, Ertz, and Reagor, and you could build a legit offense around them and have that be 80% of your offense, and I think you're going to be okay. And then let the other 15% be Boston Scott, 5% be some of those other, get Dallas Goedert in there and Whiteside and Ward and a couple other guys, and then go from there.
I agree with you. I think Reagor is their long-term playmaker for sure. I think that's exactly what they needed is the long-term playmaker because they had no playmaking ability once Deshaun went down. So I think that's what Reagor brings to them. Hopefully he's okay. We'll find out probably later this week.
That would be a huge blow for the Eagles, man. I mean, they're already battling. I mean, their defense. You got some great side. Their secondary is awesome, and I've been a Brandon Graham fan since Michigan. And I just think he is just phenomenal. I know he's getting on his last legs, but it doesn't seem like it, right? You say that every year. Okay, Brandon Graham's got to be about it. And then he just shows up again and continues to make plays, and Barnett. And their defense is a solid defense. But they really needed that offense. They needed to get compliments for Carson Wentz because everybody's kind of waiting for – here's the hard part that you have as an Eagle fan, okay, is Wentz was good, and then he got hurt. And then you won a Super Bowl without him. I mean – partly with it, but without him. And so then he comes back and everybody's kind of like, okay, is he the guy or not? Now, people that see him every day, you can see the ball explode out of his hand. You can see the arm talent. You see the leadership skills. You see who he is as a human. And you're like, okay, I want to follow that guy. That guy's quarterback 1, right? I mean, he's QB1. I'm good with that. But you don't see that really around the country. Nobody else really talks about that, right? I mean, you don't he doesn't really have a huge I mean, maybe Louis Riddick, who follows him and knows him well, but there's not a lot of national media guys that really just talk about Carson Wentz as like the guy. And part of that is because of the talent around him. He doesn't have those. He doesn't have the guys you want to. He doesn't have an Amari Cooper. All right, he doesn't have a. Heck, he didn't really have a Micah Gallup. He doesn't have a lot of big time playmakers for him. And so you thought this was going to be the year with Reagor was kind of going to be the guy, maybe getting Deshaun back and get some familiarity there. But the doors, I guess for me, and I think for a lot of other people, the jury's still out on where Wentz is, right? Is he that perennial top 10, top 5 quarterback in the NFL, or is he always going to kind of float around 11 to 15? And can he be the team that continually leads his team? And he's got it. Unfortunately for him, he's going to go against young guys the rest of the time in his division, with Dak and it's not Haskins. I don't know where Haskins fits into this, but then now with Daniel Jones with the Giants. When does Wentz make that step and onto the national stage and become the guy? And if he continues to have guys getting hurt, if you're losing your left tackle, if you're losing your right guard, if you're losing your, now one of your playmakers at receivers, it's always kind of tough to make that step. And that's not fair to Wentz, but those are the cards he's dealt. And I think it's got to be, they're battling right now to compete with the Cowboys for this division. They can't afford any more injuries if they want to try to win the NFC East.
Absolutely agree with you, Bridge. And just to finish this off real quick, what do you think the Eagles do this year? Let's forget what happened to Reagor right now. Let's just forget it. Let's say It's nothing right now. What do you think the Eagles do this year? Do you think they win the division?
I don't, only for the fact I think Cowboys are just too loaded. I think Dallas is just too good. Now, that being said, I think if you put Carson Wentz in Dallas, I think they're perennial like Super Bowl contenders all year. Like I think Carson Wentz is better than Dak Prescott. I'm just not as big a Dak Prescott fan as everybody else is, but that's just me. But I will say that I think that there's just too many complementary things. If you just go down your roster and go position by position and just compare, Dallas is just better. I mean, that's just if you don't have to be a biased fan, just go look. And if you just know football at all, the Cowboys are just better. Now, will McCarthy bring that group together? That's the difference. Is I think coaching, the Eagles have better coaching. And so that wins games. If that wins you 2 or 3 games a year, then that could be the difference. If Doug Peterson and his staff can out scheme McCarthy and his staff and in those 2 head-to-head games, that might be the difference of winning the division. But I think talent-wise, and I think McCarthy's a good enough coach I think he's better than what Jason Garrett was. So I think that is going to be the difference this year. And I think for me, I think it's a hardcore Dallas versus Philly. I think it's going to come down to the wire. And then I think also Rams. I think that if the Giants do anything, or if the Redskins do anything, I mean, it's just they got lucky. I mean, I just think they're going to fall. They'll fall into a couple wins. But I mean, if either of those teams win more than 6 games, I would be surprised. I can't see it.
I'll take the Carson Wentz is better than Dak, though, from an NFL scout. I'll take that assertion. But all right, Bridge. So again, former linebacker Marc Lillibridge, former scout, former agent as well. You've done it all. You know everything about the football side, so we should definitely listen to your opinion. You can find him at Bridges Football on Twitter, an integral part of the Brawl Network. So you check out his show, Bridges Football, right?
Yeah, Bridges Brawl on
Bridges Brawl, yeah.
But you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at Bridges Football. But on Spotify and iTunes, my podcast is Bridges Brawl, and you can find that everywhere you can find the Brawl Network and find the Eagles Brawl and all the great Brawl networks that we've given you. It's we're blowing up, and we're kind of the next big thing. And Conor, you do a great job with the Eagles. It's been kind of fun to watch your growth as you started doing this. I think this is going to be one of our bigger markets, and that's a testament to you and what you've done. So I appreciate it as one of the guys that helped get the Brawl Network off the ground, and we're excited to have you. And Eagle fans, brace up for a good year. Hopefully Reagor is healthy. Hopefully you can get Jason Peters paid, and hopefully you can keep Boston Scott getting in the end zone, because I'm going to get him in my fantasy so I can poach some touchdowns.
Yep, I got him in fantasy too. All right, Bridge, we're going to have you on the show again to talk about this, more Eagles football. So I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate the kind words, my man.
All right, man. God bless, guys. We'll talk to you later.